Every Narnia adaptation has that one new character we're all really looking forward to seeing. In Prince Caspian, it was Reepicheep. In Dawn Treader, it was Eustace. And in Silverchair, it happens to be my favorite character in the entire series. I knew almost immediately when I was reading the Silverchair that Puddleglum was going to be my favorite character, and I have a whole video on this channel called Narnia Character Study Puddleglum, where I talk about why I love Puddleglum as a character so much. What I want to focus on this video, though, is how Puddleglum should be achieved technically in the film. How much CGI, how much makeup, how do they recreate this character on screen? This is something there's been a fair amount of discussion about because Puddleglum kind of exists in that gray area. You could see where maybe they could get away with it with just an actor and makeup, or maybe they have to go the totally CGI route, you know, or maybe it's a mixture, you know, he's kind of in that gray area. Let's start from the very beginning and just read Lewis's description in the book. And let me just say right up front, if they are absolutely committed to recreating Lewis's description of Puddleglum exactly, then I think at least some CGI will be required. But I'm not necessarily totally set on that. The goal here is to create a successful cinematic character. You know, if you create a character that's exactly as Lewis described, but doesn't work as a character in the movie, well then so what? What's the point of doing that if it doesn't work as a character on screen? As they drew near, the figure turned its head and showed them a long thin face with rather sunken cheeks, a tightly shut mouth, a sharp nose, and no beard. He was wearing a high pointed hat like a steeple with an enormously wide flat brim. The hair, if it could be called hair, which hung over his large ears, was greeny-gray, and each lock was flat rather than round, so that they were like tiny reeds. Okay, so far, you could totally see where they could just do that with makeup. But then you turn the page and things get a little more complex. They now saw that he had very long legs and arms, so that although his body was not much bigger than a dwarf's, he would be taller than most men when he stood up. The fingers of his hands were webbed like a frog's, and so were his bare feet, which dangled in the muddy water. He was dressed in earth-colored clothes that hung loose about him. So it's mainly that part about the long legs and arms where I go, okay, you've got to do some kind of CGI. There's just no way to do that. It's the same reason Gollum had to be CGI. There's just no way to get somebody that skinny. I mean, just imagine a dwarf and then just take their arms and legs and just elongate them, and that's essentially Puddleglum's body. That's basically what it's like. But before we go any further talking about the best way to achieve something, let's first talk about what we're trying to achieve. What kind of effect should Puddleglum have? What are we going for here exactly? You know, everything should be driven by story and character. Well, number one, you should be able to look at Puddleglum and immediately see that he's not human. It just adds to the otherworldly flavor of Narnia. You know, the fact that we have something this is not just a guy in a costume. This is a marshwiggle. This is something that does not exist in our world. This, by the way, marshwiggles are Lewis's only original species. Everything else either existed in mythology or as a talking animal. Marshwiggle is Lewis's only original species, which really expands the canvas of Narnia. It's not just, you know, what's Narnia in a nutshell? It's a place where myths are real. Things that are mythical in our world, that you go to Narnia and they're real. The myth becomes fact. But it's not just things that we know about in our world, it's also things we know nothing about. You have things like marshwiggles. It makes me wonder what else could be in Narnia that we know nothing about. So I think it's very important that you be able to look at Puddleglum and see that he's not human. That being said, I don't want it to be a distraction. I don't want every scene Puddleglum is in, all you can think about is how skinny he is, or his weird frogged feet and hands and hair. And I don't want it to be a distraction. I just want you to buy him as a character. And a good positive example of this is actually Tumnus from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, played by James McAvoy. When I heard he was going to be half CGI and half real, I was thinking, how could that possibly work? And I just didn't realize how far the technology had come. Turns out Tumnus was probably the most impressive effect in the entire movie. The reason I say he's such an impressive effect, why he's so successful, that he doesn't feel like an effect. You have that one scene where they kind of establish, hey look, he has goat legs, he's not human, it's weird. But then after that, I kind of forget about it, on a conscious level at least, and I just accept, okay, he's a fawn. I just buy into him as a character, and I connect with the relationship that Tumnus has with Lucy. And I would like the same thing to happen with Puddleglum. So he needs to look not human, but not so much that it's a constant distraction. This is a character, he's in most of the movie, constantly interacting with Jill and Eustace, and actually having some emotional moments as well. I don't want to be distracted by how weird he looks all the time. It's one thing to say it in a book, oh yeah, he's really skinny, he's got webbed hands and feet. It's one thing to just say it in a book. But to see it in a movie, actually visualize it, and you're constantly reminded of it every time you see the character, maybe that would be too distracting. So what's the best way to do Puddleglum? Well, it kind of depends on the budget. This will probably be a lower budget movie. Because of that, I think the most likely route they're going to take is a 100% costume and makeup route, which is what BBC did when Tom Baker played Puddleglum. Still can't quite figure out what is up with his weird apron thing. Where the heck did he get that? Anyway, I think that's what we are most likely to see in this new Silverchair movie. Is once again a totally makeup, costume, real Puddleglum, no CGI. So the negative of that probably is that it might be more difficult to really convince an audience this is not human. It's not just a guy in costume, because that's what it is. One positive of that is that he's there. It's in camera. Puddleglum, for real. The actors playing Jill and Eustace don't have to use their imaginations. There he is, Marshwiggle, Puddleglum. If they went the much more expensive route, make him a 100% CGI character, yes, you'd still have an actor on set, probably wearing, green clothes or something to interact with, but I just believe there's something to be said for, there he is, Puddleglum the Marshwiggle, right there. Just in terms of performance and raising the standard of realism, there's just something to be said for the fact that he's right there in camera. I think that comes through in the final film. Another possible technique is kind of what they did with Tumnus, partial CGI. So what part of Puddleglum would need to be CGI? Well, I guess it's the main body area. Imagine getting, an actor of, average weight, or I guess he could lose as much weight as he could, I guess. Then he just wears his sort of, chest midsection, wears green, and they just digitally reduce that and make him look skinnier. That's one possibility. You obviously have to do a test to see exactly if that could work. That would be very expensive to do that for every single shot. Puddleglum is in most of the movie. Another thing you could do is have the actor wear green platform shoes that you would replace with digital Marshwiggle feet. Now, so you can make his legs look proportionally much longer than a human's. Another positive of that is, in terms of budget, you don't have to create the Marshwiggle feet in every single shot. It's only the wide shots where you see Puddleglum's feet. Probably most shots of Puddleglum are going to be, medium shots. And even a lot of the wider shots might not necessarily see his feet. So you wouldn't be committed to doing something every single time the character is on screen. And also, it reduces the risk of it being a distraction. It's not every single time we see him we're reminded of the inhuman part of it. It's just, it's the occasional subconscious reminder in the wide shots. Or maybe you could take advantage of Lewis's description in the book where he says that Puddleglum wore loose clothes. What if the first time we meet Puddleglum, then he's not wearing those loose clothes? We see just how skinny he is. And so it's just for that scene. And then later in the movie, he puts those clothes on, so they're hanging very loose about him, so it kind of disguises just how skinny he is, so you don't have to do it for every single shot. So there's lots of different things they could do. It really all depends on the budget, I think. But the most important thing, of course, is that they get the character right. And I talked about it in a previous video, once again, called Narnia Character Study Puddleglum, about what I think is so important about him. And the thing that would be so easy to get wrong about him is that they make him this Eeyore, depressed character. Puddleglum is a pessimist insofar as he's always assuming the worst is going to happen, but here's what really makes him Puddleglum. Here's what makes him this character. He's not sad. He's not a sad character. He's a pessimist, but he's not sad at all. I think he's actually a happy character. He's always assuming the worst, but he puts a bold face on it. And he's always saying, no, that's how it is, I'm just going to have to deal with it. He doesn't get sad about it. That's a really, really important point that would be so easy to miss. By the way, Puddleglum is the only Narnian character that I've ever had an actor in mind for. And mainly it's just for appearance. Even before Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe came out, I had this actor in mind. And this actor has a lot of experience, acting under makeup. And it was mainly a picture I found from one of his previous movies that made me go, this guy could be Puddleglum. And it's this picture here of Bruce Spence from one of his previous movies. I mean, come on, this guy's Puddleglum. That's exactly how I imagine Puddleglum. He's got the costume, the hat, and everything. And then, of course, they ended up casting him as Lord Rupert Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but come on, who would notice? I think one of the reasons Puddleglum became my favorite character early on was the illustration by Pauline Baines where Puddleglum has his back to the camera. And I think it just captures Lewis's description so well, with Jill and Eustace being really nervous about not knowing who or what is this thing or guy or whatever we're about to meet. And I just think it's a really cinematic image. Most of Pauline Baines' artwork would be very difficult to recreate on film, but this is something I can really see this being a really cool shot. So I would really like to see them recreate this shot in the movie. I think it could be a great shot. This video was actually inspired by a post on my new Facebook page. If you have any thoughts on how Puddleglum could be achieved on film, please post something either here on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter. I really enjoy interacting with fans who care as much about these books and this movie as I do. So if you have anything to share, please post something.